Bitcoin is exploding to new all-time highs, yet the Bitcoin Treasury companies are struggling and falling. Is this the end of the Bitcoin Treasury companies before some of them have even started? And does this mean that MicroStrategy could potentially fail, even though we are seeing Bitcoin absolutely explode? And we've got some interesting news out of the White House as well to see potentially what is going on with the Bitcoin price and why we just hit that all-time high and went back down. We're going to get into all of that and much more today. But first, let's look at how the Bitcoin Treasury companies are doing just after Bitcoin hit its new all-time high. As you can see, MSTR, CEPO, H100, CEP, Metaplanet, all of them, Nakamoto, are down at least 29% when you compare them to what we're seeing with these treasury companies. Now, of course, there is a little bit of some nuance here in the difference, and you got to try to look at the MNAVs of all of these top Bitcoin treasury companies. Of course, strategy is still just at 1.47, and some of them are even less, where we've even got a almost directly zero MNAV with 21 and its overall stock price. So, like I said, why are these stock prices now not exploding when the narrative has been that Bitcoin and MSTR are essentially a levered play? Bitcoin goes up, MSTR goes 2 to 4 to 10x up more. So why is it that we are seeing MSTR and all of these now treasury companies start to fall down? Now, before we get into what my theories are, let's check out what ChatGPT had to say, right? There's some potentially overvaluation on their holdings, right? Because the MNAV has decreased from the peak of 3.31. So we're seeing that MNAV come down from 3.31, and I showed you guys what it is, at least according to this screenshot here taken yesterday, at 1.47. We'll look it up on MSTR's actual website, Strategy's actual website here in a second. But, the interesting thing is that they're citing the decrease in the MNAV. There's some potential market speculation, which I tend to agree with. A lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies, is it the time where people are looking at it saying, hey, everybody and their mother is a Bitcoin treasury company now? Maybe, just maybe, this is not the way to go. I think that is potentially some of it. And the equity issuance policy. MicroStrategy has now new policy restricting issuing common stock to purchase Bitcoin unless its enterprise value to Bitcoin ratio exceeds 2.5. And it's currently at 1.7. So I think that it's all because of this, right? So the background on the MicroStrategy business model is that it will issue more debt to go buy more Bitcoin. And I think this is the deep dive and the MSTR flywheel, in a sense, that I go over quite a bit, right? Where we start to see, hey, you know what? These guys, they're going to start to issue more debt to buy more Bitcoin. But in reality, when you're kind of looking at this flywheel initially, right, they're issuing more debt, more common stock, and things like that to buy Bitcoin. Well, if their new strategy is saying, hey, you know what? And this new guideline concerns saying, hey, you know what? We're going to wait until we're at 2.5x. And the regulatory bodies have been working to establish guidelines to enhance this transparency. It aims to bolster investor confidence by ensuring clear and consistent reporting of financial data. So MSTR is now not going to issue quite as much debt as we are going to initially think to buy more Bitcoin. So this buying is going to be delayed, even though they are seeing, the price absolutely take off. The interesting thing is it's not just MSTR that's seeing it fall down, right? MSTR is obviously the biggest. And, if you look at their overall holdings that they're reporting live, which I think is great, their MNAV's at 1.62 right now. And they have 628,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So these smaller guys, even though they are following the direct MSTR playbook, it's interesting to see that they are falling like a rock off a cliff a lot faster, I might add, than we are seeing from anybody else. So MSTR falling down and Michael Saylor, everybody's asking, hey, what's the deal? Why are they falling down, right? So, like I said, they do own almost 630,000 Bitcoin. I don't think that they're doing terrible per se, but everybody's looking at them and looking at the other, Bitcoin Treasury companies as they are starting to come on, right? Because all of these guys, basically, their whole goal is to buy more and more Bitcoin, just to keep it going, keep the cycle going. But because they are limiting themselves on the amount that they can buy, well, these buys are actually becoming a little bit smaller. So they have to wait and actually see where this thing is going before they can start to see that, right? So if you look at their actual holdings and their fixed income, well, it looks like that they are, going up in a sense, right? I mean, it's not slowing down, but the amount that they are buying is a lot less over these weeks, right? So Strategy bought just 155 Bitcoin this past week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's still $18 million. And they're still buying at near the all-time high price. So they're buying on the way up. It's just the debt is not being lent out as drastically because of this MNAV right here. So the way that these companies are going to obtain debt is they need to have a higher premium when it comes to Bitcoin. And so the premium on this Bitcoin decreases as the Bitcoin price goes higher and the stock price doesn't follow. So this MNAV that they're getting reported, right, is actually somewhat hurting them from getting more debt to buy Bitcoin. Now, that's just in the short term, of course. And a lot of these treasury companies are going to start to come on and buy more Bitcoin. But this is the big kicker here, is that the more of these treasury companies that come on, the more that are obviously buying Bitcoin, the more that we're seeing getting scooped off exchanges. And you guys know I love to show this chart of the Bitcoin on all exchanges chart. And okay, granted, there is 225 Bitcoin on our 2 million.25 Bitcoin on exchanges. But if you look at the Bitcoin on OTC desks, we are seeing that actually get scooped off. And people are talking about, hey, a Bitcoin potentially supply shock here. And of course, that word, scares some people in a sense. But what I do believe is that, these Bitcoin treasury companies, you see, there's over 100 of them right here with at least 40 Bitcoin on there. This number of 167, 15 of them have come within the past 30 days. So one every other day. And the amount of Bitcoin on public companies' balance sheet is nearly at $1 million or 1 million Bitcoin. So almost a full Nakamoto. Honestly, obviously, that's coming from one big player. But when we see Bitcoin OTC desk and we see headlines like this, Bitcoin prices on an OTC desk is it's set to uncork because Bitcoin on these OTC desks is running dry, right? There's 155,000 Bitcoin on currently known Bitcoin OTC desk addresses. And, granted, there's 450 mined every single day. So there needs to be some bigger sellers coming in because guys like MicroStrategy, like if you go through Michael Saylor's, honestly, if you just go through his Twitter feed here, look, you got another one, DDC BTC. They're buying Bitcoin, and they're back from a strategic pause, buying 120 Bitcoin, right? They talk about their holdings coming to an all-time high. He's retweeting MetaPlanet and their great quarterly earnings. They're talking about, MetaPlanet having its strongest quarter in its history. All of these companies starting to come on, and the HODL 15 Capital looking at Bitcoin and the Smarter Web company. I mean, like all of these guys are coming on. and MicroStrategy stock is still declining, right? It's because these guys, when they keep buying more Bitcoin and more of these players start to come on, it's making it harder for the average company to get debt to buy more Bitcoin, right? And especially when that MNAV is not in a place where they are going to be able to raise more debt to buy more Bitcoin, well, they're stuck in between a rock and a hard place where, the only issue that Michael Saylor saw with strategy is, hey, he's openly admitted, if my company is unable to raise more debt to buy more Bitcoin, that would be the biggest detrimental issue of my company. And what is going on here? Well, in the short term, they're unable to raise a lot of that debt. So that's why you're seeing the stagnation in the MSTR share price, even with a huge jump in the Bitcoin price. Now, with that, right, I don't think MSTR is dead, even though it is a leverage play and there's the dilution that hasn't happened. And even if Bitcoin's rising, the broader market separate of specific news related to MicroStrategy can influence the stock price. And it's not a direct proxy, even though it's heavily influenced by Bitcoin's movements. And it does have a premium to some of these Bitcoin holdings. Now, I'm going to get into some of the political reasons why I think potentially we are seeing MSTR not absolutely skyrocket in flight, but I think that this all shows to what we all think here in the Bitcoin space is that we shouldn't be selling our Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin, it's the most pristine collateral on the planet. And so I was looking for a partner to help you guys out, but I think I've found one in Salt. If you go to saltlending.com/greencandle, they will offer you guys an exclusive offer for the listeners of this channel. You can go here, go to saltlending.com/greencandle, unlock the special offer. You can't just go to Salt Lending. You got to go to the /greencandle to get this special offer. They will give you guys rates starting as low as 8.95%, 12 months, 70% LTV. Look, between you guys and me, they are going to give you guys potentially 0.5% off on this. Just got to look at everything. There's no credit checks. There's no rehypothecation, so you guys don't have to worry about it, about anything crazy going on. And at the same time, they offer Salt Shield. They're no liquidation solution, so you don't have to lose any sleep when you are lending against your Bitcoin, because we all know it's the most pristine collateral. It's the hardest asset on the planet. You don't want to sell it. So let's now give you guys some free sats courtesy of my friends over at The Bitcoin Well. If you go to The Bitcoin Well, no, if you go to justbitcoinwell.com/greencandle, you buy some Bitcoin and you sign up, you'll get 2 chances to win 1 million sats. And look at this. They're even giving away a freaking Cybertruck the more Bitcoin you buy. They're giving away some great prizes here. So why don't you guys get your Lightning wallets ready, because we are going to give you guys some sats here. And make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button and that like button here, because boom, every time you come to the Green Candle live chat, I'm giving you guys some free sats. We got 532, sats here, courtesy of my friends at the Bitcoin Well. And if you missed it, just go to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle. Sign up today. What the hell are you guys doing not signing up just yet? Because we've got some interesting news here, folks, on the United States front. The United States Secretary just uncovered a secret that the U.S. has been trying to hold back for quite some time. Is the United States buying Bitcoin? Are they going to buy Bitcoin? Or have they been the one that has been suppressing the Bitcoin price and selling off? Because all of the metrics, when you look around and you look at all the buying, Bitcoin should be absolutely exploding. But at the end of the day, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said something very, very interesting in his latest interview about what the United States plan for Bitcoin is. Now, let's listen in and let me know if you guys got this audio here.
To get into the 21st century, a Bitcoin strategic reserve. We're not going to be buying that, but we are going to use confiscated assets and continue to build that up. We're going to stop selling that. I believe that Bitcoin reserve at today's prices is somewhere between 15 and 20 billion. We've also.
So he said, we're going to stop selling. So they've been saying, hey, you know what? They are actually selling Bitcoin, and they openly admitted that. Now, with all this, why is Scott Bessent coming out and saying that they are selling Bitcoin and actually uncovering the total amount of Bitcoin that the United States has? It really makes you think. And with all of this, with what we've been seeing here just recently, is that we've had Bo Hines recently resign for reasons that I don't know. And then we've also had some things come out, and now Scott Bessent is saying that the U.S. might not have all the Bitcoin that they are openly saying. Now, he shared this tweet that Bitcoin has finally forfeited to the federal government here today, and that the strategic reserve, and they're not going to buy any more Bitcoin. They're going to find these budget neutral ways. That's the real kicker here. All these budget neutral ways of what we have. So it's very, very interesting that we're seeing this continuing to go through, because we're having Scott Bessent essentially walking back on his statement here, because they've only said that they hold that 15 to 20 million, and the Treasury is committed to exploring these budget neutral pathways and execute the president's promise of all of this. He said that they're selling Bitcoin. He essentially said all of this while admitting that the US might only have about 150,000 Bitcoin instead of the near 200,000 Bitcoin that they have. So it's gotten into some crazy territory where everybody and their mother is asking themselves, does the US actually have the amount of Bitcoin that they're claiming? Now, it's hard to believe that we have all of these issues here going forward with the United States and actually now looking at the amount of Bitcoin that they have. But at the end of the day, Scott Bessent is saying the quiet parts out loud. So we have to ask ourselves, why, oh, why do we have the Treasury Secretary coming out and saying these things when the U.S. could potentially have this? And then we had the rumor of the DOJ reporting only about 50,000 Bitcoin now over, right? So Walker is saying, hey, you know what? Kind reminder, the Bitcoin doesn't need the U.S. government, and that the toxic Bitcoin's maxis forced the Treasury Secretary to walk back on their earlier comments. So Scott Bessent saying all of this and saying we are not going to be buying Bitcoin is very, very interesting, because he straight up outlined, hey, you know what? We're going to look for these quote unquote budget neutral ways. We're not going to be buying Bitcoin. It really makes you think, right? Why would the U.S. come out and say these things? And all while Scott Bessent resigned not too long ago. And if you look at the government entities, right, down here, according to my friends over at BitcoinTreasuries.net, the U.S. allegedly has 198,000 Bitcoin, only 8,000 more than China. Now, if the U.S. wanted to keep that global dominance, well, we would have to be buying more and more Bitcoin. And I don't know if they necessarily are with all of this attitude. You got to read between the lines when it comes to these things, right? So they just look at Bitcoin as maybe some, fun thing to play around with. But, the reality is we're seeing these treasury companies come and scoop up Bitcoin. And I had to show you guys this meme because I think it's hilarious. You receive exposure that's 3x less than the Bitcoin you could have bought yourself, when we're seeing all of these things crash and burn. And it's just leaving me to believe that we don't need anybody else when it comes to the Bitcoin space. We're seeing all of these treasury companies start to come on. We're seeing the government's potentially buying Bitcoin. And it just brings me to the point where, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, if you just hold Bitcoin, your life is going to be a lot easier instead of having to worry about all of these treasury companies having that ability to raise debt, instead of, giving your Bitcoin away to these ETFs, because Bitcoin on ETFs just keep absolutely exploding. And all of these guys just absolutely buying up more and more Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, the easiest thing to do is just to buy Bitcoin so you don't have to worry about these treasury companies claiming that they have the 22 million Bitcoin or something else, right? Because when you see things like this, the US president or Treasury Secretary, excuse me, Scott Bessent, now coming out and saying, hey, you know what? Well, the US is going to be buying Bitcoin and are not buying Bitcoin, excuse me. We're not going to be buying Bitcoin. And this is something that, we're just, hey, we just not going to sell anymore. We've seen this from governments previously. China. We've seen it from Bulgaria. We've seen it from Germany. All of these others, right? But we're starting to see some other guys come online and buy Bitcoin. And I mean, granted, we have a little bit of a dip here today, just sitting at 4.3%. But when Bitcoin skyrockets up, we haven't been seeing the same amount of leverage on these Bitcoin treasury companies. And that's because of the issues that I was lining out earlier, just the inability to get all of this debt. So buying Bitcoin at the end of the day, that's the holy grail. Now, if you're looking for another way to find and get some Bitcoin, well, you can do it in some tax advantage ways. You can mine Bitcoin. And I love my boys over at Simple Mining. You could go to simplemining.io/greencandle, schedule a call with them because they have tax strategies, all of these different ways that you guys can get exposure to Bitcoin where you don't necessarily need to go and, maintain a miner in your house, do anything else. I don't want to do it. I mean, I've got my dog over here. I live in a 750 square foot apartment in Florida. I don't want to be dealing with that loud noise, the anything else, dealing with all of it. So I let my friends over at the Simple Mining, they have the facility over in Iowa. You guys can go through there. They actually let you do depreciation, some tax benefits, and other things like that. So if you're looking for ways to get around that, I would go to my friends over at simplemining.io. So schedule a call with them today. Do it quickly because you guys want to get on some of these hash rates that now is hitting an all-time high, unlike the people over at MSTR who are not hitting that all-time high. Now we got some people popping in the chat. We've got a very lively chat going on here. So I'm going to check in with you guys. If we find a way for the Fed or Treasury to lock USD to stablecoin, it's on. Barring that, we're already where we want to be legally, in my honest opinion. I think we're still waiting on the US to go and find budget neutral ways. Now, where I think is interesting of some of these budget neutral ways that we haven't had, discussed here today is how much would the US get if they revalued their alleged gold holdings, right? Because this is, looking at the current gold price and looking at that. Now, at the current gold price, their gold holdings is worth about $523 billion. So that $523 billion, now they don't need to do it at the 10,000 ounces, $10,000 per ounce, but at the current US price, $523 billion, just at $2,000, use the current gold price. And we'll use what they allegedly hold now. So if we look at this, the US is going to have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold reserves now, actually, of quote unquote budget neutral ways, right? So the difference would be $925 billion. or 914, excuse me, billion dollars. So that would open up a large amount for the US to buy Bitcoin. And the US wouldn't even need to be using this reflexive flywheel. And I always wonder, like, all right, if we need to find, why do we need to find budget neutral ways, right? When the US, I mean, you guys saw all the crazy things coming out of the Doge, but when we have this thing ticking up like crazy like this, right? We have the US debt at 37.2 trillion. Next time I come to you guys here tomorrow, it'll probably be at 37.3 trillion. Why do we need to figure out a way to avoid, avoid using some of the budget to buy Bitcoin? Because we're continuing to see this absolutely run up. And, all of these treasury companies are having problems getting debt. The US government should not have any issues getting debt at this point, right? I mean, you look at the MNAVs across the board, we got basically everybody up a lot, except for, I mean, Tesla's MNAV is absolutely insane here. But they don't hold a bunch of Bitcoin. They're not actively buying. GameStop, same kind of deal, right? I mean, we see these guys get on board with Bitcoin and then, they kind of back off, right? So hopefully we don't start to see, Bitcoin treasury companies start to come on just because of the tax advantages, all of these other things that you're seeing. We've got a large number of you guys in here, so make sure you're hitting that like button and hitting that subscribe button. We got nearly 250 of you across YouTube and X right now. So make sure you guys are doing that, telling a friend to tell a friend. And let's keep on tracking what we've got here, because these hurdle rates, they're looking at, hey, Bitcoin as the new hurdle rate, right? We've got to watch out for all of these treasury companies. I think that the true and best way to go about holding Bitcoin is just in self-custody, folks. So make sure you guys are doing that and doing that properly. I recommend using Trezor. I've got a great link. I'm going to put it in the chat here for you guys to go and buy a new Trezor. I've got my Safe 5 right here, right sitting next to me on the sleek orange. It's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. You guys can go to the affiliate link I just posted there. It should send you right here to the trezor.io. You can use promo code GreenCandle. You'll get 5% off anything on here. And then following that, you can go to cryptosteel.com right after that. Buy a case. You could buy something for as low as $30. And if you use promo code GreenCandle, well, they've got the backups everywhere, right? So they've got one for Trezor Safe. They've got all of these different things on here just so you guys can get it all set up. You can use anything. You could get different colors. You could do all that. You use promo code GreenCandle. You'll get 10% off your entire order. So do that and store your generational wealth in the easiest way possible, because we're seeing Bitcoin tick up to all-time highs. And these treasury companies, right? It's paper Bitcoin. The true power of Bitcoin is holding the physical asset. So I highly recommend you guys do that. Obviously not huge financial advice with all of this, but I mean, we're seeing a bunch of people like the UAE. You guys check this out. $300 billion UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund revealed that they bought 147 million of sovereign or of Bitcoin exposure. Now, if you look at sovereign wealth funds by visualization, I went through and did a live stream on this the other day, but Norway, the biggest sovereign wealth fund and pension fund in the planet, increased their Bitcoin exposure by nearly 200% in the past year. And now we're seeing the UAEs do something else, right? So we're starting to see this tick up. We're starting to see everybody around the world bend the knee to Bitcoin. It's a very exciting time in the Bitcoin space. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel and hitting that like button so you guys are coming into these green candle live streams, and I'm keeping you all up to date. Thank you guys all for coming in, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.